Hello, and welcome to another virtual episode of NASA Science Live. I'm your host, Tahira Allen, and today we are thrilled to talk about a real once-in-a-lifetime event. As you might have heard in the news, on December 21st, the two largest planets in our solar system, Saturn and Jupiter, will appear in the night sky as if they are nearly touching. And yes, you will be able to see this with the naked eye, no telescope needed. This rare astronomical event, known as the Great Conjunction, only appears every 20 years. However, the last time it has been seen this close was in 1623. So get excited because today we are talking all about the Great Conjunction, from the science behind the event to where you'll be able to see it in the night sky. Throughout the show, we'll also be sharing photos that people have taken from around the world of Saturn and Jupiter coming together for this big moment. Let's get started. I am joined today by Dr. Henry Throop, astronomer at NASA headquarters. Henry, thank you so much for being with us today. I've been seeing so much buzz about the Great Conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter online. And can you share with us what's the science behind what's happening?
Thanks for having me here. It's so great to be able to talk about this conjunction that almost everybody on Earth can see. So what's happening here? Let's step back and look at our planet's place in the solar system. In the solar system, we have one star at the center, that's the sun. And then outward from that, you have the orbits of each of the individual planets. You have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and then in this case, Jupiter and Saturn are the ones that we're interested in. Now, you can imagine these as being, each of the planets is running on its own circle, essentially. It's like runners on a track where we have the Earth and the sun at the center, and we are looking outward through the rest of the solar system and be able to see the rest of the planets outside of us, especially Jupiter and Saturn. Now, every 20 years, every 12 years, Jupiter goes around the sun. Its orbit around the sun is every 12 years. Saturn, the next planet out, has further to go, and it's moving slower because it's tugged around less strongly by the force of the sun's gravity. And so Saturn is quite a bit slower. Saturn takes 30 years to go around the sun, when Jupiter takes 12 years. So every 20 years, Jupiter is going to pass Saturn in its orbit. And you can imagine this just being like runners on the track. You're standing there at the center, and you've got a fast runner on the inside track, and they're overtaking and passing the slower runners going further on the outside track. And that's exactly what's happening in our solar system this week. In this diagram here, you can see Jupiter as it's approaching Saturn, and then from our perspective on Earth, you'll see it lined up almost in exactly the same place in the sky.
Okay, so if this lines up about every 20 years, why is this one occurrence so close together since 1623?
That's right. So the planet's orbits are not exactly flat in the solar system. If they were exactly flat and everything was in the same plane, then the planets would in fact cross in front of each other. And so Jupiter would block Saturn in the sky. Because the planet's orbits are slightly tilted and not aligned exactly, then the planets pass near each other, but not exactly in front of each other. Now, usually, every 20 years, when Jupiter overtakes Saturn in its orbit, it passes about a degree apart from Saturn in the sky. And a degree is about twice the width of the full moon. So you can see them separated very widely in the sky, about like yay. Now, this particular time, they're coming very close, and that's just because of the alignment between them. They're not close in space. They're still hundreds of millions of kilometers apart from each other, but they're in the sky. They appear as 2 points very close in the sky, and it's about a tenth of a degree apart. In fact, they're so close that if you take your pinky and you extend it at arm's length, you'll be able to cover both planets with just your pinky finger. Now, this is a rare alignment. This happens just about every 400 years. The last time it happened was 400 years ago when the planets were this close in the sky.
Wow, I mean, what a treat for all of us, to end out this year. This is so exciting to hear about. And I understand that there's some really cool history behind the event. Can you walk us through what that is?
Yeah, let's go back. What was happening 400 years ago in the solar system? The solar system was still there, but we on Earth were just in our infancy of exploring the solar system using telescopes. The first telescope was used to explore the solar system by Galileo in the year 1610, which is a little bit this last conjunction of this size was in 1623. In 1610, Galileo was using his telescope to, for the very first time, look at Jupiter and look at its 4 moons. And this, in fact, is an excerpt from his notebook at the time. At the bottom there, you can see a big circle, which is Jupiter, and you can see 4 little circles, and those are Jupiter's moons, named Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. And so in 1610, just before this previous close conjunction, what we knew about Jupiter was that it had these moons. They had just been discovered. Similarly with Saturn, Galileo was using his telescope to look for the first time at the rings of Saturn. He didn't know what they were, and it was later observations. What Galileo saw, and what Christian Huygens, another astronomer soon after him, saw, is that Saturn looked very, very strange. We now know that those are the rings going around Saturn. At the time of they were described as handles on a cup, or perhaps moons that were fixed on both edges of Saturn. So 400 years ago, that's what our knowledge of the science of Jupiter and Saturn was. You can, in some of these images now, it's actually very easy to see these moons, very similar to how Galileo was seeing them. Galileo's telescope was a couple of inches across on the lens on front, and with a similarly sized telescope or binoculars or camera lens, you can see those moons very clearly now. Here's a couple of pictures where you can see the moons of Jupiter. Those, we call them the Galilean moons. The moons of Jupiter extended from Jupiter, and then you can see Saturn up on the top there. Here's another great shot that shows the 4 moons of Jupiter, the faint spots with Jupiter at the center, and then you can just barely see the rings of Saturn. Now, in these images, it's a little bit hard to see the rings of Saturn. Saturn is further out, and so it appears smaller in the sky, but the moons of Jupiter are quite easy to see if you have telescope or binoculars. Many modest-sized binoculars are easy to see the moons of Jupiter with.
Wow, so we're really living history right now. And I'm curious, will anyone around the world be able to see this, or do you have to be in a special location?
So this is really neat that the planets going around the whole solar system. The Earth is rotating in such a way so that you can see all the planets from essentially everywhere. Planets are bright also, so you don't need to be in a super dark location. In fact, even if you go to the most well lit, heavily lit city on the Earth, then you can see the planets quite easily. So the only place you might not be able to see this conjunction between the planets is if you're in Antarctica. This season, the sun is up in Antarctica, and so it's going to be light all day, and the sun doesn't set, so you won't be able to see the planets from Antarctica. Pretty much anywhere else, if it's not cloudy, and if you don't have something in the way, then you should be able to see the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in this all month long in December.
That is such great news that everyone around the world can take part in this. Well, most everyone. And when and where should we be looking up into the night sky?
So this conjunction is happening during the entire month of December as the planets are coming closer and closer and closer together. Right now, they at the beginning of the month, they started off maybe 2 degrees apart. Now they're a little under a degree apart. And then on the night of December 21st, they're getting to be about 1/10 of a degree apart. And they'll be a similar distance to that for the day before and the day after. In order to find the planets in the sky, it's really easy. If you just look up, if you can see the sunset, that means you're looking to the west, the southwest, if you're in the northern hemisphere. If you can see the sunset, then you'll be able to see Saturn and Jupiter. You want to go outside about maybe 45 minutes after sunset, let the sky darken a little bit. You don't need to wait till nighttime. And then look toward the sunset. And you'll have about an hour of time where you can observe Jupiter and Saturn in the sky. What they'll look like is very bright stars. Jupiter will look like the brightest star in the sky. Of course, it's not a star, it's Jupiter. It's reflecting all of its light, not internally, and the light doesn't come internally, but it's reflected light from the sun. And then Saturn is going to be a little bit above and a little bit to the left of Jupiter and a little bit fainter.
So while these planets have been inching closer to each other, we actually asked the public to send us in their photos of Saturn and Jupiter. So while we play through some of these awesome submissions, could you share some basic tips for how we can best photograph this event in the night sky?
What's really great is that Saturn and Jupiter are bright. You don't need sometimes with astrophotography, you need really fancy equipment, and you need a telescope, you need a mount, and so forth to take photos of the planets. But with these, there's so many opportunities, even from well-lit cities, from bright cities. You can see the points of light in the sky. Many of these photos that have been submitted here and that we're showing have been taken with phones and with small cameras and so forth. I like photos where you can see, in fact, some of the foreground, so you can see the context for what we're seeing here. Here you see images over some houses and buildings. Some of these other pictures, you've seen images of the planets over cities or in front of trees and so forth. That kind of brings it home that anybody can go out and see these planets. If you're using a phone, smartphone, you want to take photos of it. Many modern phones have what's called a night mode on that, and that will let you take an exposure of a couple of seconds long. It will kind of automatically stabilize the image for you. A couple of seconds will let you see the dark night sky as well as the bright Jupiter and Saturn there, and the moon if the moon is passing nearby as well. If you have a larger camera, like a DSLR, for instance, then you can take a wide-angle picture really nicely, which will show the whole context of the sky. And then if you zoom in a little bit, then you can see, if you have a large zoom lens, like about 200 millimeters or so, then you'll be able to see the moons of Jupiter itself as well. We have some other photo tips that we put together. There's a website that you can go to. It's at go.nasa.gov/planet photo tips. And I hope that people will be able to look at those tips and take some great photos showing the solar system that we can see in their context around them.
Wow, that is awesome. I am so excited to go out there and capture it for myself. And I know so many people tuning in are as well. We have received some really great questions from users online. And I want to remind those tuning in, it's not too late to join the conversation with us. Please don't hesitate to submit your questions in the comment box wherever you're watching from, or by using the hashtag AskNASA on social media. So Henry, to kick things off, I've got a great question from Kate on Twitter, who asks, will the Great Conjunction be much brighter than how we normally see Jupiter and Saturn?
The Jupiter's and Saturn's distance from us is similar to what it is other times of the year. It's a little bit, it goes up and down a little bit during the year as the Earth moves through its orbit, but no, it's not substantially brighter. What is going to be unique here is how close Jupiter and Saturn are to each other. So they will look the same, but they're going to be inching closer and closer and closer to each other in the sky. Now, when they get to be 1/10 of a degree apart in the sky, you'll still be able to separate them as two bright objects. It's not like they will merge into one, but you should be able to see them as two bright objects right next to each other in the sky.
So I've got a great follow-up to that. Amal on Twitter asks, what will be the distance between Jupiter and Saturn at the time of this great conjunction?
So they're still 600 million kilometers from each other. So there's very little influence between them. They're not, for instance, the gravity of Jupiter is not affecting the gravity of Saturn in any unusual or any strong way at this point. The motion of the planets is controlled almost exclusively by their gravity around the sun rather than their gravitational interaction with each other. So this is not something that's going to move the orbits of any of the planets. This happens every 20 years. If the solar system wasn't stable, we would have known about it long before now.
So Simplicator on Twitter wants to know, what's the exact time of this closest alignment for us to catch it?
So the exact time, oh man, I forget the exact hour of it, but if you go out on the 21st, it's the distance doesn't change very much for the duration of the 21st. So during that 24 hours, the distance will change only a small amount. And so from everybody's individual location on Earth, you'll have about an hour, maybe a little bit more, in order to see the planets before they set, depending on what your horizon is. So they'll be up about an hour after sunset, and then they will set about 2 hours after sunset, more or less. So you have about an hour or so window, and that time is going to be, the exact time is going to be a little different depending on what time zone you're in, but it's always going to be right after sunset.
So I know you mentioned earlier that really almost everyone around the world can see this, but a user on Twitter says that they live in New York City and that there's so much light pollution here and it makes stargazing tough. Will the Twitter user be able to see it with the naked eye? And how long will the conjunction last?
If you're in New York City, that's good news for you. Stargazing is hard, but planets are bright. Jupiter and Saturn, Jupiter in particular, you can see from almost any city in the world. I've lived in some very big cities with very bright lights in them, and we were still able to see the planets extremely well during these. You should be able to see Jupiter and probably Saturn from even from a place like New York. And if you don't see it on the 21st, that's okay, because who knows? You might have clouds, you might have might not be able to see it for any number of reasons on the 21st. That's okay. Go out on the day before, the day after, and so forth. Because this conjunction, it's a month or so of the planets have been coming together closer and closer in the sky, and then it will be another couple of weeks of them getting further apart until they set early enough that you're not going to be able to see them. And so if you miss it on one day, just go out another day and see them. In fact, I think that's really one of the neatest things here, is seeing the motion of the planets, seeing them come together, and seeing our solar system change as the planets go through their orbits. That's just as exciting as seeing them close to each other on the conjunction itself.
That is such great news. I know I've been seeing so many people saying online that in their area on December 21st, it's cloudy. So it's great to know that we've got some time to really watch this come together. And Amy on Facebook is asking a question that I've seen a lot. She wants to know, why are people calling it the Star of Bethlehem?
So this so-called, people have been enchanted by the stars and by the sky above us for thousands and thousands of years. People have been always looking at the sky, looking at the motion of the planets, looking at the motion of the stars and the moon and the sun. And there's cultures and religions and people around the world who have been taking our observations of these of the solar system and incorporating that into their traditions and religions. It's the Star of Bethlehem refers to a possible event or observations around several years BC, near the birth of Christ, and it is quite possible that there was a conjunction in the year 6 or 7 BC, and a conjunction very much like this one here, where Jupiter and Saturn were near in the sky, very near to each other. Maybe it wasn't a tenth of a degree, but maybe a degree apart. So it's possible that a conjunction like this was what was referred to as the Star of Bethlehem. But there are many other possible things this could have been as well. For instance, there are comets, which are visitors from our solar system mostly, but which appear in the sky as they are passing toward the sun and past the Earth. There are novas and supernovas, which are essentially different versions of exploding stars and brightening stars. And there can also be alignments between planets and some of the stars and some of the constellations, which can be inspiring for people. So for the Star of Bethlehem itself, we don't know for certain which of these possible astronomical phenomena was responsible for what's known as the Star of Bethlehem. Any of them are possibilities, and scholars and historians have proposed all these. They're all plausible ideas, and without additional observations from the time, it's hard to say for sure exactly what it was. What is exciting is that everybody on Earth is going to be able to go out and see this and continue this deep connection between people on the Earth and observations up in the sky, and continue this connection that we have to the sky above us.
And I think it's so cool that, like you said, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, that we are all looking up at the same thing, and we are all just connected by this amazing, once in a few lifetimes event. And in that same light, there's a user on Twitter that says, I'm confused. Every piece of info I've read about this event says that it's happened once every 800 years or once every 400 years. Which is it?
Okay, that's a great question. So every 20 years, Jupiter passes Saturn in its orbit. And so every 20 years, there's going to be a conjunction where they are a degree or so apart from each other. However, just like the moon is up half the time during the day and half the time during the night, sometimes this conjunction is going to be during the daytime instead of during the nighttime. So if this happens during the daytime, you could see it if you knew exactly where to point your binoculars, but or where to look in the sky. But it's really hard to see the planets during the daytime. So with this conjunction, which happened 400 years ago, 1623, even though that was just right after the first use of the telescope by Galileo and others at the time, it is quite likely that nobody on Earth actually saw it in 1623. It was a very close conjunction, tenth of a degree like this one, but it was during the daytime, and so Galileo had no record of seeing it. Other astronomers at the time had no record of actually seeing it, and so it's possible that the last conjunction that was this close in the sky, which was during the nighttime, was in the year 1226. And that was the previous one, which was widely observed.
Wow. So I've got a really great question from Hanno. He is 6 years old on Facebook, and he wants to know, when was the first time NASA discovered the conjunction?
So the conjunctions have been known about for a long time. In fact, there's a Greek astronomer named Ptolemy who was in about the year 100 AD, and he was one of the first astronomers who was able to predict very reliably the motions of the planets. Johannes Kepler, also in the late 1500s and 1600s, was an early astronomer who was very much into mathematical descriptions of the planets, and he was the one who first understood their true nature and how they orbited around the sun in his observations. And so, using these observations, people have been able to predict and understand the conjunctions for quite some time. So this is not a new event. NASA has known about this for a long time, as have many other observers of the sky, and we are really excited to share this with everybody else on Earth, and have people go out and explore the solar system with us.
So I'm so glad you just said that about sharing this with everybody on Earth, because we are celebrating 20 years of continuous human habitation on the International Space Station. And Elaine and Adriana on Twitter are asking, will the astronauts on the ISS be able to see the conjunction?
I believe the astronauts should be able to see the conjunction, yes. We'd have to verify that with the astronauts. It depends on exactly whether their orbit should pass in such a way that they would be able to see it. They have a great view of the sky there. They are unaffected by the Earth's atmosphere, and so they should be able to see the conjunction along with everybody here on Earth.
I hope that happens, and they take some really great photos from up there, so maybe we'll see one of theirs after the 21st as well. And I have Kitty on Twitter who asks, is there a specific thing that scientists hope to learn from this moment, or is it just for the delight of us to see?
This is just a great time to go outside and see the sky. We're not doing observations because we would be doing observations if, like, Jupiter was passing directly in front of Saturn, and we could use Saturn kind of as a flashlight to probe through the outer atmosphere of Jupiter. That would be something which scientifically would yield some science which we perhaps might not be able to do otherwise. And if Jupiter were passing in front of another star, if Saturn were passing in front of another star, that would be something we would study. In this case, they're not passing in front of other light sources, and they're not passing actually near each other in space. So there's no scientific observations which NASA is studying, but we are really excited to just go out there and watch them ourselves.
Nice. And so, I mean, it's just great that all of us get to do this and, learn a little bit about it. And for those that do have a telescope, Brianna on Periscope asks, will there be a huge difference if I view this through a telescope?
So depending on the magnification of your telescope, I think it should be, what a telescope will do is essentially like a camera lens, but bigger. Now, on the night of the 21st, usually a telescope has a high enough magnification such that you can see Jupiter or you can see Saturn, but you're not going to see them at the same time. You have to point the telescope to go back and forth between them. And on the night of the 21st, this is going to be the only time that if you have that telescope, you can look at Jupiter and you can look at Saturn, and you're not going to have to repoint your telescope between them. So that's what's going to be really, really neat about looking at it through a telescope. And I'm looking forward to lots of people taking pictures through their telescopes of Jupiter and Saturn in the same field at the same time.
Yes, there's already been some really amazing ones online just showing the rings. I cannot wait to see what it looks like close together. And we have Wanda on Twitter who wants to know, should we be looking high or low in the sky to see the conjunction?
So the sun sets due to the rotation of the Earth. The planets rise and set from east to west in exactly the same way as the star and the sun and the moon do. And so what you'll see if you go out about 30 degrees, go out about 45 minutes after the sunset, and you look about 30 or 40 degrees up in the sky, about halfway up in the sky, a little less, you'll see Jupiter right there. You're not going to miss it. If you have a clear view of the sky and a clear view of the horizon, you're not going to miss Jupiter there. And then look for Saturn. Saturn is going to be a little bit fainter and a little bit higher than Jupiter. And then you've got them both there, and then you can just follow them as they slowly set in the west.
So I have Maria on Twitter who wants to know, has there ever been a triple planetary conjunction?
Just like you can have a conjunction between two planets, you certainly could have a conjunction between three planets. Now, statistically, it's harder to, just like your one runner on the racetrack can pass another runner, like every orbit. If you're waiting for 3 runners on the racetrack to line up, it's going to take longer for them to all get lined up at the same time. So instead of waiting every 20 years, it might be, depending on which planet it is you might have to wait maybe 10,000 years for 3 planets to line up. But you bet, you wait long enough, and then eventually that's going to happen too. We can predict, or we can know, because it's a very the motions of the planets are very well understood. We'll be able to predict when that happens, but it's not going to be anytime soon for Jupiter, Saturn, and another planet that I know of.
Have there been any other planetary conjunctions in the past couple years that people could have been able to see?
Yeah, well, there certainly are other planetary conjunctions. Mercury and Venus are the faster moving planets, and so sometimes we see they move faster around the Earth, and so they cover more. There's more chances for them to get lined up, just like those runners on the track. They're moving faster. We sometimes also see what we call our occultations, and that's where or a transit, and that's where the planet is moving in front of something else. In the case of our solar system, both Mercury and Venus have, in the last decade, had transits which took them in front of the path of the sun. And that's really, really cool. NASA and so many millions of people on Earth witnessed the transits of Venus and Jupiter, Venus and Mercury in the last decade, where you saw a little dot which was traveling across the surface of the sun. Now, again, it wasn't interacting with the sun. It was far, far, many millions of kilometers in front of the sun when Venus and Mercury did this. But it was really exciting to see that, because that requires a very precise alignment, and those are very rare events as well.
So, Henry, I've got one final question for you that I'm dying to know. What are you most excited about for this event?
I'm most excited for everybody to go outside and look up and really see our place in the solar system. What's really neat here is the solar system is this moving object, this big 3-dimensional object, and the planets are moving around, and we're moving around, and the sun, the moon, the moon is moving around us, and this just gives people on Earth a really great chance to go out and see where they fit in the solar system. And don't go out just one night, go out several nights and see how the motion of these planets changes relative to each other, see how their position changes relative to the stars, see how the position changes relative to the sun as they're going to move relative to the sunset, and really use that to make your link to the motions of the planets around us, just like people have done for thousands of years.
I mean, Henry, your excitement is getting me excited, and I'm sure those watching as well. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise with us. And for those of you tuning in, thank you for spending some time with us. If you'd like to know more about the Great Conjunction, sky watching tips, or what's up in the night sky for December, visit go.nasa.gov/what's up. For more information, you can also follow NASA's Solar System on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Happy sky watching, and we'll see you next time.